right, welcome back to this week's blog recap. This week's blog is titled Must Be Taken Daily Without Exception. What are we talking about taking daily? Let's get started. Last week, probably the last couple of weeks, I've been focusing more on the aspect of self awareness and self management and the importance of that when it comes to wanting to make any type of changes in your life. So this week, what we're talking about is actually making a self commitment, meaning making a commitment to yourself to become the person that you need to become to live the life that you truly want to live. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into this week's post. Of course, you can catch this post, read it on www.pivotseekers.com/blog. So go there. I suggest you go there and check it out after this. If you haven't already, to go ahead and get the fullness of the blog and all of the content that's within it, as well as my personal stories that I share pertaining to this particular topic. I may touch base on it here, but definitely check out the blog itself to get a better understanding. Commitment. What is commitment? Defining it. Commitment is the act of binding yourself to a course of action, intellectually or emotionally. That is definitely a specific definition found online. I found it on vocabulary.com. I looked at several definitions. Of course, Webster's is always the go to. But this particular definition, I felt like truly spoke to what I was trying to say when it comes to terms to committing to yourself. Just like we talked about intentionality, you have to have commitment. So I want to focus on that particular definition. And I think the key in that definition is you're binding yourself to your own cause, right? Because you could be binding yourself to something at work or business or ministry or if your family or your relationship. But what about binding yourself to a course of action that moves you in the direction that you need or want to go? So then you are binding yourself to your own cause. Making a commitment involves dedicating yourself to something like a person or a cause. Before you make a commitment, think carefully because a commitment obligates you to do something. Commitment requires action and is an ongoing process, and it obligates you to do something. That means action, not just thinking it, not just planning it, actually putting pedal to the metal and making stuff happen. Okay. Whatever that may be, whatever decision that you make, whatever pivot or change or transformation that you are seeking, whatever that looks like for you. For me, that would be my personal health or weight management, the management of depression and anxiety, managing relationships because I've attempted to isolate myself for so long that I have to be intentional and committed to relationships in my life, friends, family members that I need to keep close, people that are part of my village that are pushing me into my purpose. These all require a commitment in some way. I mean, some commitments hold a greater priority than others, but they do require something. They require me to be mindful, coming out of my own thoughts in order to ask someone how they're doing, getting to know people, spending time with them. Even your relationship with God, that requires a commitment because you're required to know who He is and who we are to Him and why we are here in His presence, right? That requires a commitment. That's something that you have to do continually in order to see and reap the benefits of it. So you have to do something in order to be committed. Um, we talked about pivots basically being projects in your life. And if you don't make action, you go nowhere, right? I believe that's something that we're going to talk about later. So, what's the difference between our commitments to external focus and internal necessity? I'm pausing for effect here because I want you to think about that. Most of us are fully conditioned to commit ourselves to external focuses, whatever that may be. If you have a family, every person in that family, the husband, the spouse, the partner, the children, if you have grandchildren, or your parents, your siblings. That requires some form of commitment to show them that you love them, that you care, that you're there for them, to show up for them. But what about the internal necessity that's required, the commitment that's required in order for you to show up for yourself? That's what I'm talking about today. Others benefit from our commitments more than we do. And that is big facts. Man, is that big facts. I wrote, it's a tragedy that many of us leave this world having given ourselves in totality to everyone and everything but ourselves. But what about who we see in the mirror? He or she, for me, she or they, deserve a commitment. How can we grow as people? How can we evolve with life if there is no commitment to knowing who we are, where we're going, what we want, what we need? Commitment is required. So let's see. My personal journey to sticking to self-commitment, I wrote about self-sacrifice. As a young mother, it's like I automatically morphed into this carbon copy of the women in my life, a repeating cycle of self-sacrifice for the livelihood of my children, men, and even my family in certain seasons. If you also throw in my devotion to serving in my local church, I was already on a fast track to burnout and misery. Not because devotion to church and family are terrible decisions, but because I sacrificed the one person that made it possible for me to even show up. And that one person was me. There's a common denominator in all those commitments and all those relationships and all those stipulations and obligations in your life. And that one common factor amongst all of them is you. So yes, sacrificing yourself is something that you have to do occasionally in order to be a quality person in this world. However, constantly sacrificing yourself leaves no room for your own growth, your own care, and your own awareness. Self-sacrifice should not be a repeating cycle to the detriment to self-care and self-awareness. So I want you to think about that. If you're giving everything and you're allowing everyone to drain you, what's left for you? That's what we're talking about here. If you don't sit down and allow yourself to think about it, pray about it, and let it become a reality, it seems unnecessary. But in the end, long term, let's say, for instance, you get divorced and you're an empty nester and it's just you. What do you have? And how many women have found themselves in that situation where they feel like they have nothing because they don't know themselves? They lost themselves many decades ago. Now that everyone else, all those external obligations are gone, all they're left with is themselves. And ultimately, we are very important because if we don't have us, no one else can have us either. You feel me? So, this is why it's so important to consider yourself when it comes to the commitments that you make in your life. I also provided tips for making a commitment to yourself and staying on track. So I want you to make sure that you check those out because you know I love a good question. And there are several questions here for you to consider in order to think about you making a commitment to yourself moving forward. Self-awareness is everything. Quality of life depends on you being in tune with your values, what makes you tick, how you are wired, how to hack yourself, your tendencies in order to move in the direction that you desire to move in. All of that requires a commitment to yourself. So I hope that makes sense. That's it for this week's blog post recap. Please tell me what you think. Please go and check out the blog if you have not. And we'll move on. All right. Take care.